Hello and welcome to our webinar today on moving accounting systems there. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time, and as you can imagine, there's plenty of ways and methods to look at implementing an accounting system. But what I'm going to do is just give you some headlines on what we should look for. But so on the agenda there, it's what we're going to expect on a moving accountings, process and tasks, some benefits of running a good implementation, and if we've time there for questions at the end of it. But first of all, I just want to briefly introduce Pimbrook there to anyone on today who hasn't heard of us. So first of all, when I set up the business there, I suppose I was primarily focused on our customer service. And as you'd expect any service industry to be the same, but I suppose my mission was to ensure that we were implementing good systems and not just selling software. And that's where I started from. And part of that then was to ensure we have good customer service, was to track our follow-up and see, did we do as well on the support as we thought we did, and offer the opportunity for feedback. And we've been tracking that, and we're very lucky to know that we've been tracking around 99%. But I do know, look, that we have to strive every day to maintain that, and through that we're doing training all the time. We're looking at the knowledge of the staff that we have. The other area that Pimbrook concentrate on is, I suppose, getting the calls answered. And I mean, it sounds silly, but one thing we make sure is that people aren't in a queue for long. There are peak times, obviously, systems go down, ROS goes down, etc., that we have to put up with. But that's something we want to ensure, that when you phone in, not only are you getting through quickly, but you're getting through to a person at the other end of the phone. Sage 50 and Payroll are two products that we concentrate on. So we're very lucky we can laser in on those products and ensure that we have the best expertise and product knowledge around that. And the other area that Pimbrook like to consider is, if you've invested with us, is to offer things like webinars. Webinars either covering topics on the product or bringing in partners who may be able to enhance the product further. So that's something that we like to do. And a request came in there through the last couple of years of looking for more of a managed service. So not just your support calls being answered at the other end of the phone there, but to ensure that any request that comes in can be covered under your contract. And I suppose finally, we have implemented hundreds of systems to date. So I'd hope we'd have some knowledge of the area there. So moving swiftly on to why we're here this morning, is looking at when you're planning on a move. And some of these things become quite obvious, but you don't put the thought in up front when you are. So when people are going out, they're looking for a product, they're looking for a solution to make sure that that is going to suit their business needs. And that's great, and that's been achieved, and financially you've agreed to pay whatever that is. But once you have moved past that, stage, you need to get into really now the planning of that. So timelines. People ask us when can they go live? We can give you whatever date you want, but the most important thing is you start with your go live date. So once you have your go live date, then you work backwards. And what that does is that tells you if you're able to achieve what you can do in that distance from today to the go live date. And that's taken in things like staff holidays, bank holidays, seasonal work that may be part of your business. So that leads us into the project planning. And this is critical to every successful implementation. You can see black and white where the responsibilities and the expectation of the role of the key users and deadlines that are in there. Now, at this stage, you may have to rethink your go live date, because you start to see that it's not possible to achieve those dates. The other part is the IT company. We need to be connected up and in communication with your IT. They own the platform that we are going to implement onto. And they run that. All we do is ask for access and permission, and we need to make sure that we're working in tandem with them. And that's a relationship that we like to foster going forward, because if it becomes technical issues, customers not interested in that, they're just interested in the solution. So it's very important that we are connecting. That can be internal or external once we get the introduction. Day-to-day duties, they continue regardless. So there is a burden of time on people to implement the new system and to do their day-to-day duties. So it is sometimes a consideration whether you bring in maybe some trainees or some juniors that be able to do some of the tasks either on the project or on the day-to-day duties, or you outsource some of the areas. So you need to ensure, because that continues, and albeit that there is an additional burden onto staff, is that you are still considering in the short term, what can you do to alleviate any of that part. Training, who do we train? And we get a lot of this, well, why can't we just train everybody? And yeah, that's no problem, we can do. But is that actually practical? Excuse me. For a couple of reasons. It means everybody's away from their day-to-day duties. So will that work for you? Now, quiet business, you can close the office. That's great. That makes sense. The second thing is training everybody does take longer. You've a lot more people in the room. You've a lot more questions coming back. What we look at is the principle of train the trainer. So we're training one or two people, or depending on how many people need to be trained. And what that does then is, when the person we've trained goes in to train the rest of your staff, is they're being presented back with questions and they're being challenged on their understanding of what they've learned. And that can reinforce the knowledge that we're trying to impart, or the understanding of what the processes and principles are that we're trying to get across and change. So it's certainly consideration that you don't train everybody depending on the numbers, but you do allow those people to be freed up. And then what you can do is, when you're controlling the training internally, you can control the amount of time that is allocated to those sessions. Buy-in. Look, you will get people in an organization who are saying that a system needs to be changed, it's not working, it's slow, etc., etc. That does not mean that they actually want you to change the system. They may not want the hassle of that. There can be fear about it. Will it affect their job? Will it have any impact on their hours? Will it reduce the dependency that you have on that? So we need to make sure that there are promoters in there, and we get quick wins when we're implementing a system. And that's all the preparation and setting the expectations when you are embarking on this journey of the time. So what do we do? Well, assuming that we're going ahead and we haven't frightened people off on all the preparation, but look, that's something we need to say up front. We need to set the expectation, and for people to understand what's going to happen once we move to this stage. So we go in as a team and we talk about your current processes and procedures. And that's just for us to understand what is going on in the business. There is no point in us being presented with a report on the day you go live and being told, unless we've got that the business can't run. So we need to understand what are the important aspects for you, and we need to understand if we can match and map what we're planning to put in that suits the business, and also where are the improvements we can make on the processes. It can be reducing the paper load, it can be reducing the admin, it can be reducing phone calls between departments. So that's the purpose of us sitting down with your staff and ensuring it is not there to criticize what you're doing or challenge it. It's just purely an exercise. If we don't understand what your business does, we understand the software, we understand its capabilities, but we have to be able to match that. Data migration and cleansing. How much data do you want to bring across? Now, we frequently hear we want to bring everything from the old system onto the new system. Why? It all starts to become historical as year one goes by, year two goes by. But that doesn't mean that there is not an amount of information you need to look at. So we talk about master data. So this would be your customer, suppliers, products, nominals, etc. So we look at those. You take an opportunity to cleanse them. Customers that you haven't been dealing with for years, and having a look at that and seeing is if you can take this one-off opportunity, clean up the system, and ensure you're bringing forward what makes sense to you. And that leads us into eventually near the end of the project is the opening balance, but it's still data. So for instance, have you your accounts allocated up to date? If you've things like, and we've all got it in all our businesses, a euro outstanding or cent or stuff that's years old and you haven't written it off, it's a good exercise to cleanse those balances and ensure that they're nice and tidy so that when you're starting your new system, anything after that is the responsibility of the new system, and anything prior to that, you've seen what it is and you've gotten rid of it. So it is important that you take those 2 points collectively and ensure, because it does lead on to skipping a point in the reconciliation of both systems. We have to ensure that before we sign off the old system, that all the balances that have come across are all correct and adding up to exactly where we've left off. Okay, and that exercise can be reduced, as it is time consuming, if the systems are nice and tidy. Time must be given to company and system parameters. Things like postponed accounting, multi-currency, on your reporting. You know, how do you want to report your nominal structure, your chart of accounts? All these things must be given time, because usually once they're fixed, it's how the system is going to behave, and what you put in is what you're expecting to get out. Third party. So are you introducing a third party because you've got an opportunity now to improve some of the functions, and there may be an industry specific piece of software that you're using, or you're currently using, or you're bringing in? We need to identify where that sits in our project. Does it come in after we've implemented because it's new, or do we have to ensure that it's integrating on the day you go live? And that test must be performed at some stage, the beginning, middle, or the end of the project. But it must be known up front what the expectation, because we could have file formats and data mapping to ensure what we're taking from the existing or new system you're proposing is available and possible into, in our case, we talk about Sage 50, but into whatever system that you're planning on implementing. So a lot of tasks there to consider upfront, and that's where the workload needs to be. And why? So we want an efficient implementation system process. And I say that going back to the opening statement of all the preparation. It seems like hard work, but it's all for a smooth implementation. It's to avoid the surprises for the staff, particularly if they've been added to their workload. The go live, I've been in a situation where we went live and there was a different team there. They weren't involved in our particular go live. They had actually a third party that failed on their go live. And he came to me and said, "Oh, you didn't go today." And we were saying, "No, we did go live today." And he said, "It's very calm out there. There's nothing seems to be going on." And that was the sign of a perfect go live, where all the work had been done. I'm not saying that there wasn't very tired people on the team at that stage, but there was no big surprises on the day. There's little tweaks that we need to make. We're working hand in hand with the staff, but the most important thing, it's all done up front. You or I cannot afford for the implementation to flow into support, because the fear and the frustration of staff just heightens, and then their confidence drops. So at some stage during your tasks and your project, and as you're reaching or failing your deadlines, you may have to consider a revised go live. Now, usually that is in bigger systems, bigger implementations, but it should never be taken off the table. You should always be confident that when you go live, it is the right decision. Now, you've made an investment into this migration into a new system. So the one thing you should be achieving after it is being the ability to grow, but not grow where it includes headcount unless it's quite specific. Your system should be allowed to grow more before your headcount. Now that could include adding more software to it, but it should be able to grow greater at a less investment than what a headcount is. And also remember, the headcount that's in your business currently probably don't achieve what their whole role is about. There's probably lots of scope to introduce. So no migration should be considered a reduction in headcount. It should be utilizing it much better. So to give an example, one that we did recently there, Moy and they gave us permission there to talk about them. So they were moving from I think it was a very old system, and they were moving to Sage 50. But what they were also doing is they were introducing a lot of different processes and introducing a third party, and they wanted the third party to go live. Um, I won't say on the same day, but mostly in conjunction with that same go live date. So we had to be very mindful of when we were setting up parameters with them that the consideration was for the third party as well. And when they were saying that they were importing invoice information or order information into Sage 50, we had to ensure that they had fields available in Sage 50 for that third party. Now, as it turns out, sometimes when it comes to your reporting, then you start to look and go, well, actually, the third party should be producing some of those reports. So we don't have the responsibility of certain information. But what we need to make sure is that in this example, we were responsible for some operational information, but definitely supported by financial information. So if there was drivers that needed to be, which routes they were going on, how efficient the routes were, how many routes were happening per day, we had to financialize those, opposed to the third party was just doing schedules. So it just gives an example as one of our latest ones there. As I said, they gave us permission to use them as an example. They're very happy. I can't say that they're not busy with the changeover, but they did dedicate themselves to the buy-in, which was a lot of the success of the project, and they made it actually, in fairness, very easy to work with them. It was actually a pleasure to work with them. To be fair, they were very open. So just to recap on a few things, there, what I was talking about, every project is different, but there are some common areas, and that I go back to refreshing on the timelines, making sure that you can achieve the workload before your go live. Project planning, ensuring that you are aware of all of those deadlines, and if those deadlines are starting to be missed, you need to take a break. The IT company, ensuring that we have the communication with the IT company and it's open there. Your day-to-day, ensure that you've considered the burden on the existing staff and workload that are there. Who should you be training, and getting that buy-in? Once though, they're the important introduction pieces of any implementation. And once they're achieved, then it's coming in and making sure that we can just get through the tasks. And whoever's appointed to those is allowed the time to do it. So I want to thank you very much for joining us. As I said, headlines onto what an implementation considerations need to be made. If there's any questions there, I'm happy to take them, and please feel free to follow up with any further questions afterwards if you wish to, on the email or phone number in front of you there. Okay, I've one there. Costs. Costs, to be honest, would be quite specific to the system that you were looking at. So depending on the size in the Sage 50, we're in a subscription model, so you'll have your software and licenses and support costs on a monthly basis. And then you'll have usually a daily rate on the number of days. And usually you will kind of start with the suggestion of amount of time that's needed for a project. So it's quite specific. On a Sage 50, we could talk about, depending on anything from, it could be 3 days to 13 days, depending on the degree of change and how much workload you're taking in-house yourself. Um, the data. Yeah, the data, hopefully you can export the data from your current system if it's not moving from Excel there. So most modern systems have an importability where we would normally do is we would look at the system we're taking over from, we would work with the company, export that out into CSV, work through the data, and map it into the Sage 50 columns and then import it into Sage 50. And at that time, we would be taking snapshots to ensure that the data is as you'd expect to see it and ensure it's come through successfully. Go live. Yeah, it is always the one. I was only at a site there the other day and they were saying, can we go live on the 1st of April? And my first answer can be yes. It's very simple for me to say that. But can you do what I talked about in the project planning? Can you afford the staff to be let go for that time frame? And all of a sudden, the go live date changed from the 1st of April to the 1st of June. But then the consideration started jumping in and it was holiday season. So could that be achieved? So the go lives worked with us. But usually on our lead times, we're usually working within a 2-week lead time, outside of things like Easter and things, we've our own holidays to consider. Migrating all of the data, as I mentioned earlier, you have systems that could have 10 years worth of information. I'm not a promoter. We have done it. I'm not a promoter of taking data from system day dot. It adds a significant cost to the implementation, and because you have to reconcile, you have to consider when the payments were put in, they're allocated off. And to ensure all of that timing, you've got your age debtors, your age creditors, you have to make sure all of that is matching. So something that I would take off as case by case and work with the client to see if it was really appropriate, an investment they really wanted to make on time. Just having a quick look through there. Train the trainer. Yeah, just to recap on that. So if I was going in and let's say that there was 5 or 6 people or up to 10 people to be trained, I would probably consider maybe 2 to 3 people as key users. And these key users get to see the whole system. So they're the go-to they're the champions in your business for the system and the implementation. And they would also be prepared to take that project on. They would be they had the buy-in. And what they do then is they would take 1 or 2 of the staff and show them the pieces that they need them to know. So possibly not all of the parameters or the areas, because if they work in purchasing, it could be something that they just concentrate on the purchasing area, just concentrate on the nominal, the bank, etc., etc. And you'll find that funnel of information is getting to the end person much quicker. I don't think there's any more coming through there. As I said, there's many methods, but the items that I was talking about are the headlines to a successful one. How it's expanded out and how it's applied really is the team. And I have to say, part of your exercise when you're going out looking for your software, I can't stress enough for you that you pick the correct partner. The partner who has the same ideas as you and the same vested interest into the success. And that success is, in my case, my selfishness on the success of a project is that it's not coming in to support, the problems aren't coming into support after the go live. And it's a very simple benchmark that it's all done as part of the project and then handed over to support smoothly when it's done. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining me there this morning. I'm happy to follow up with anybody who has questions or interested in taking that any further. Thank you.